Open to be Agile, podcast episode 8, Self-Managed Work Cultures for the Win. An Open Leadership Symposium speaker interview series. This interview with speaker Doug Kirkpatrick. First, let me start out by explaining what the Open Leadership Symposium is. The Open Leadership Symposium is an event for anyone interested in improving workplace culture, productivity, and optimizing results through the power of invitation and engaging the people through open practices. Open space is an engagement model that leads to an engagement plan. It generates a place where ideas that are good can and will be accepted from no matter where they came from. This is a movement that is generating huge results for many companies and is the future of leadership in the modern workplace. The Open Leadership Symposium is bringing together a collection of like-minded movement leaders that will help you start the movement on your own, enhance your present culture, and give you ways that you can get great results through the awesome people that you hire to do extraordinary things. The Open Leadership Symposium will be held on May 14th and 15th, 2019. May 14th will be a collection of speakers and presenters, and on May 15th, it'll be a day of masterclass workshops. The symposium will be held in Boston, Massachusetts, actually Burlington, Massachusetts. If you truly want the real deal business agility, this is the linchpin without a doubt. The open movement is coming on strong. Visit their website for more information at openleadershipnetwork.com. Here is a bonus. You'll get to meet me there as well and our other Coaching Agile Journeys leader, Heidi Araya. Heidi will actually be presenting at the conference. Now, before I get into the interview, for the record, this started out as just an interview to learn about Doug Kirkpatrick as a person and as a speaker, but it quickly started evolving into a true lesson on a self-managed workplace culture that is entirely worth the listen. A self-managed workplace is modern, thriving, innovative, and rewarding, and it gives everyone meaning to the work that they do and how they do it. It's the ideal workplace of the present and future of our culture and where we're heading into business society. I have to share this with you first. Advice or information on self-improvement can come from anywhere. I just found it this morning. However, this is the tip I'm going to give you. Don't just recognize good advice or good inspiration and say, oh, that's great, and just let it go to the wayside. Find a way to use it. Otherwise, it's worthless. One of my friends that's on Facebook, her name's Lisa Warfel. I moved here to Florida, where I live now, with her. We both kind of met in Ocean City, and we made a journey to Florida. Both our parents happen to be in Florida, and she became a good friend of mine, and we stay in touch to this day through Facebook. That's one of the great things of social media. And she posted this on her Facebook page as a self-realization this morning, but I found I could add value in my life and probably to the lives of others, and it kind of worked with this whole entire podcast. So here's what she said. Me. I have my life all figured out. Also me, 10 minutes later. Thank God Outlook reminded me I didn't include my attachment. We never have our life figured out. We just have to ensure we have the appropriate attachments. Whether that be modesty, friends, family, learning, help, be open to your circle and let them be open and vulnerable with you. You will win much more than you will lose. By the way, true story about the attachment. I was so pumped to send something and checked it over several times, hit send, and a reminder that I needed to stop and check myself. That was her statement, and I found it so interesting. Nobody is perfect. Let me start by saying, and for all of us to remember that, sometimes we all have to just stop and check ourselves. But people do manage themselves at home. They raise kids, they pay their bills, they're adults, they make their own food, and some even have some interesting hobbies and build crafty things. We're all smart, we're all intelligent, we've been trained in something, and we have brains to think about complex matter. You have hired intelligent people at your workplace. Sometimes they too just need some attachments and occasionally need to be reminded to check those attachments. In order to unleash the most optimum results, you must be open to unleash the people. Unleash the teams from forced direction and imposition. Be open to giving this a try. Authorize them. Empower them. Allow them to self-manage and see what happens. If you are a manager, executive, or director, stop and introspect on yourself for a few minutes. Ask yourself, do I direct people? Do I regularly tell people what to do? Am I demanding? Do I actually listen to my people? Most important, am I one of those titles that I just mentioned, manager, executive, director, who takes pride in sitting atop of a hierarchy of people in a powerful position that I feel I earned, which gives me all this power and authority, entitlement? Or am I a leader my people trust? Leader and executive aren't a synonymous relationship. Just because you're an executive doesn't mean you're a leader. People determine that, which you'll hear in this podcast as well. We are advancing. Society is changing, and the culture of our workplace is steadily changing and improving. The future is right here in this podcast episode. But this paradigm shift is tough pill for many to swallow. But if you're open enough, you could help lead this paradigm shift and experience the results. Don't wait. Find something you could do tomorrow to start giving this a try. The people should be empowered, and they should be authorized to start creating, innovating, and doing great things. Stop and check your attachments. And just be that prompt on the screen, like Outlook was to Lisa, that people could trust to help them remember their attachments. This is a great podcast right here for learning about self-managed culture. And this is a great speaker, Doug Kirkpatrick, who's also done a TED Talk and has authored many books. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Open to be Agile, the podcast. Today we have a great guest with us, Doug Kirkpatrick. He'll be speaking at the Open Leadership Symposium in Boston on May 14th and the 15th. And I got to watch a great TED Talk that Doug did on empowering the people of organizations and moving away from the imposition of force, directives, and demand from higher positions. Basically engaging people. I won't say any more, and Doug, I'll let you speak for yourself about you, your organization, and what you do. So go right ahead.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity to exchange today with you on this podcast. So I started out in business a while back, got out of college. I met a young entrepreneur named Chris Roofer, started in a high-tech food company in California, and joined his team as a financial controller. And we created a fairly successful little company, but it was also in some ways frustrating because we hadn't put any thought into organizational design. And so we sort of defaulted to the traditional hierarchy, the typical command and control pyramid that you see almost everywhere. And very frustrating because no matter where we were, where an issue or a problem or a dispute or a conflict arose in that pyramid, problem always went straight to the top of the pyramid to the founder because we had an open door policy, and that's just what happened. So we got zero value, probably got negative value out of our structure. And so we had our founder at the top, the apex of the pyramid, and then we had a layer of managers, of which I was one, and a layer of supervisors below the managers, and then a layer of coordinators below the supervisors, and then everyone else that did all the work. And we started collecting insights over the years. And one of the insights was that the founder was watching people come to work and realizing that each one of those individuals is a manager already in his or her own personal life. So every one of those individuals coming to work is making life-altering, significant decisions about who to date, who to marry, where to go to college, what to do for a living, whether to buy a house or a car, or take out a mortgage or have kids or whatever it happened to be. And yet when they walk through the portal of the workplace, all of a sudden they're just not smart enough to do anything without a boss. So that didn't make a lot of sense. If they know what to do at work and how to do it, why do they need a boss? Get out of the way and let them do their job. So that was one of the key insights. And so he started a subsequent company in 1990 called Morningstar. And I joined him there as a financial controller. And just about this time of year, it's March of 1990, we were working out of a little farmhouse, and he called a meeting and said, I'd like to talk with the core team here about how to organize the company. And so there were about 24 of us at the time. And we all said, that's great. So we met with them in a construction trailer, and he handed out a document called the Morningstar Colleague Principles. And basically, he wanted to organize around simple, clear principles. And they boiled down to two things. One, people shouldn't use force against other human beings. And two, people should keep the commitments they make to each other. And we thought, okay, well, this is very kind of radical, but also very simple. You know, we can cognitively process and hold these concepts in our heads and as we go about our work. And so we said, sure. And we adopted that as the governance of the enterprise. And at that moment, we became what we call a self-managed enterprise. So the company grew, and we added another factory and another factory, and we expanded up and down the supply chain and became the largest tomato processor in the world. And so I believe everyone in North America has eaten our product. It goes into everything in the grocery store you can think of, from ketchup, salsa, pizza sauce, spaghetti sauce, taco sauce, and all the rest. And we export worldwide. So we had a significant footprint in the food industry. We grew from 24 people to 100 people, and then 200 people, and then 1,000 people. And now we have about 4,000 people that work on a seasonal basis, about 500 on a year-round basis, 3 factories, the largest tomato processor in the world. And we've never deviated from our 2 core principles. Don't use force and keep commitments. We think these are the most fundamental principles of human interaction. They're the foundation of all law. So all laws against assault and battery and theft and burglary and kidnapping and murder and all the rest are predicated on the principle of not using force. Contract law is certainly predicated on the idea of keeping commitments. And if you think about it, we know these are fundamental principles because imagine a world where everyone abandoned the use of force. We wouldn't need armies or navies or police or locks on our doors. And we know that's not reality, but that's not the point. The point is the closer we get to that ideal state, the better off we are as human beings, and the more space we open up for happiness and harmony and prosperity and all the good things in life. Imagine a world where everyone did what they said they were going to do. That would be an amazing world indeed. And we know that's not reality. But again, that's not the point. The point is keeping commitments represents integrity, which is the foundation of trust. It has economic value, but it also has human value. If you imagine a world where everyone kept the commitments they make to each other, it'd be pretty amazing. So the closer we can get to that, the better off we are as human beings. So that's a foundation. We think it's a good foundation. It's enabled us to grow from zero to become the largest in the world in terms of that particular product. And in terms of myself, I've been an independent consultant for a number of years now, work with New Focus Strategic Group at New Focus USA, nufocusgroupusa.com. And we provide master classes, education, and training in organizational self-management. We do organizational audits. We have networked organization software. I do speaking, keynotes. I write books. I've got a new book coming out with Forbes shortly called The No Limits Enterprise, Organizational Self-Management in the New World of Work. And we do boots on the ground consulting as well. All those things combined, that's kind of what we offer the world. There seems to be a lot of interest. Just got back from India, working with a company there and also master classes. It's been a lot of fun, and it seems to be something that the world is interested in at the moment.
Well, I just think I learned something as you were speaking, and this is very interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, you said you were a financial controller.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's very interesting because one of the reasons in the world that we work in and my experience that I hear, I got to revert to stepping in and taking control. I have to make sure this gets done right is the pressure that revenue and financial performance brings and being able to deliver quicker. You were in that position and you have a totally different perspective on this non-imposing, non-command, let people use their intelligence and deliver. What would you say to any of the skeptics that are currently there right now in their organization under this financial pressure? I mean, you've seen it work. What could you say to these people that would help them think differently?
Interesting question, Jeff. I would say there's no inherent contradiction between financial control and organizational self-management. They're not mutually exclusive, in my view. Morningstar, we could track numbers to the penny. For a while, I was able to produce financial statements that were audit ready pretty much at the stroke of midnight on the last day of the fiscal year end. And so there's no contradiction between tight understanding of numbers and good financial controls and organizational self-management. Organizational self-management just means that individuals assume full accountability and responsibility for certain business processes. They assume a certain quantum of decision-making authority surrounding those processes. And then they represent to their peers that they will execute those processes to the best of their ability. And so to the degree people are competent and engaged and are focused on doing their jobs, there's no contradiction at all between excellence and accuracy and good performance and having a self-managed enterprise. In fact, I would argue there's arguably more accountability in a self-managed enterprise when people speak up about issues of importance to them, because who's more likely to notice a problem in the workplace or an opportunity in the workplace? A manager who's wandering through a work area a few times a day, or people who are working side by side with each other all day long and are fully equipped and feel fully capable of speaking out about any issues that are of concern to them. And of course, it's the latter, because there are more eyes available to spot problems and opportunities.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's a fear and intimidation tactic that the people at the grassroots level and the people turning the wrenches, they don't want to speak up. They don't want to identify the problem, or they have this imperative fear that they'll be thrust into the spotlight and forced to deal with it on their own. So it's definitely a cultural phenomenon for sure. I'll slide into a question I have on the TED Talk you gave, and it's beyond empowerment. And I started to dig into that a little bit. Could you tell the audience about Beyond Empowerment?
Sure. So Beyond Empowerment's the name of my first book, and what I came to appreciate in the course of my Morningstar experience is that we didn't talk about empowerment a lot. And the reason is that empowerment implies that one person with power is lending his or her power to a subordinate who has less power. And there's a big challenge with that, because anything that you lend can be repossessed, and frequently is. So we had decades of quote-unquote empowerment programs washed through corporate America, and having various effects, good and bad. But ultimately, they're self-contradictory, because when you lend power, you can take it back. And so if I lend power to someone to go develop an empowerment program and they don't develop it to my expectations, and I remove their authority to continue with that program, then I'm exhibiting the very characteristic that I'm, trying to fight against in the first place. So it's a totally self-nullifying concept. In a self-managed organization, we really start with zero command authority, and everything is accomplished through request and response. And of course, if you have an ecosystem of request and response, it means people are free to say no. Everything's negotiable. That's scary to leaders. I mean, many leaders fear that. They want to be able to crack the whip. But here's the challenge and the opportunity. When you have to acquire the mantle of leadership through trust, respect, and communication, it actually makes you a better leader. It strengthens your leadership muscles. You learn how to attract followers and retain followers. And that's really the only metric of leadership, whether or not you have followers. I can take 100 classes on how to be a great leader. If I don't have any followers, I'm not a leader. Also, the flip side, if you can just order people to do things with the expectation that your commands will be obeyed, that's not really leadership, and that actually causes leadership muscles to atrophy and get weaker. If I can just tell people what to do, that's not really a skill. That's just being able to tell people what to do. But if I have to persuade them, influence them, create trust and thorough communication, That's really the foundation of good leadership.
Yeah, Lou Holtz said it about when he got offered the job to come to Notre Dame University to be the football coach, and the athletic director said, "We want you to be the leader here." He said, "That's not a position. That's not a role. The only ones that are going to tell you if I'm a leader or not are those players out there on the field." And then at one other point in my career, I had a colleague, someone I considered a mentor, I looked up to, say about one of our leaders, "I'd follow that guy down a loaded gun barrel."
Okay.
I mean, that's a lot to say about the type of charisma, the type of trust you have in an individual. And when things get really, really bad, that's the person you kind of lean on. You don't feel so scared or so like, we got this. We're behind a good leader right now. They have a plan. They know how to do this. So that's interesting, but that's not everywhere. So what do you think is making it so difficult for this paradigm shift that we're in right now for people that are real managers, maybe micromanagers, or they have that title of a director, and director implies that I'm going to direct you to do things. Why is it so difficult, do you think, for these people that feel that they have to operate that way to find other ways to decentralize and allow people to basically self-manage?
Another great question, Jeff. I'd maybe look at three areas. One is institutional. So if you look at business schools today, they're really mostly about preparing people for the career ladder, the traditional bureaucracy, the career ladder. And I've approached many business schools to gauge their interest in having a talk or a workshop of some kind, and often turned down. We're too busy, we're not that interested. We've got our own curriculum to deal with. Kind of like to pursue the current path because, that's what's made them grow in the past. And so they don't see any reason to change. So they're turning out class after class after class of traditional minded business managers who look at the world through the lens of hierarchy and climbing a career ladder and acquiring titles and perks and power. So that's one, institutional. Two is cultural. We've had centuries of bureaucracy, and it starts in our families where we have command and control, and our schools have been based on the Prussian education model, which is push kids into a classroom, cram information into their heads, ring a bell every hour, have them move to class, and follow a program curriculum, and shoot them out the other end, and believe that they're prepared for the world of work. And I always found that somewhat dehumanizing when I was a kid in school, and didn't really enjoy it in some ways. But culturally, certainly our businesses, the military, educational systems all sort of gear toward the command and control model. So that's what we're used to, and that's what we expect culturally. I would also argue a third source of this problem is biology. So, for example, Ian Robertson wrote a book called The Winner Effect, How Power Affects the Brain. And he learned that, or described that when people issue commands, when they exercise command authority, they get a shot of dopamine in the brain, and some people become literally addicted to power. And it's a big problem. Dr. Keltner, a psychologist, the researcher at the University of California, Berkeley, has studied some of the characteristics, the behaviors of people who are in positions of power. They have actually identified that people's manners and the way they treat other people degrades as they acquire power and exercise power. So it's kind of a big human problem. And it's really the reason why we have institutions like separation of powers and an independent judiciary and a free press and all the things that we sort of take for granted in a democracy, because we're trying to create checks and balances to counteract the natural tendency of human beings to try to acquire power, which is a big problem.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So we just kind of myth busted right there. Money and power and respect. The myth that was busted is money and power does not equal respect.
Right.
That's the fact. And, I was listening to one speaker talk about how at some point in someone's life, they got aggressive on somebody and the other person cowered to that person's fear. And they like that. That's where that dopamine that you talk about kicked in. And they're like, wow, I can intimidate people to get things my way. And this person was a former Navy SEAL, and they said, that's lack of self-control. That's not professional. You're not using your intelligence. You're using an intimidation tactic. That's different. That's not going to get results. That's going to scare people. And I definitely can see where that came from. Hierarchy's been, ingrained in the workplace for years. And like you said, I think it's so cultural and it's been there. But there are people, especially people I know right now, that want this change to happen. They want to help advance this. Any thoughts or advice you'd give to these people that are in the workplace right now that can encourage this movement?
Read and study and network. Get to know the thought leaders that are out there, sort of evangelizing for the future of work and trying to catalyze lasting change and transformational change. I created a little instrument a couple years ago called the Interactive Periodic Table of the Future of Work, and I tried to identify as many catalysts for change as I possibly could. And there are a number of movements and a number of thought leaders and a number of conferences and sources from academia and kind of even people that study biology and nature and natural teams and the animal kingdom and sort of natural processes to find metaphors and analogies to help us figure out better ways to organize. So there are lots of resources out there, lots of conferences you can go to, lots of books to read. I encourage people to start small. You can only do what you can do. You can only influence the people that you can influence. So try pilot projects. Try a little pilot project so you can get authorization to create a self-managed department or work unit. And when you can demonstrate a success and you can respect the outer organization, which is likely a traditional organization, then you can build credibility and trust. And you can build some social capital that may allow you to expand your experiment beyond a small space. So I say do what you can and just kind of weave your thoughts and your practices and your future-oriented beliefs into a system that works so you can demonstrate success and hopefully go further.
Yeah, I come across people that I alluded to as the time clock punchers. I come into work, I punch the time clock, and I go home. It's a little bit of an obstacle. They want to be told what to do, and they want to list and check off the list. They don't want to think. I actually had one person tell me at one point in time, the reason I got into software engineering is because coding was something I could do and not have to be on a team. I could just write code myself. That's the wrong business to be in because now it's big time teams. Mm-hmm. And then there's another sector that we tend to be challenged with when we're trying to create this type of work environment or atmosphere, and that's competency and skill deficiency. So let's start with those time clock punchers that don't really want to be empowered or don't really want to make decisions or think creatively. They'd rather do their job and go home. What are your thoughts there?
There's a place for those people in a self-managed ecosystem. Absolutely. And some of those people are great, and we need some of those people. So the way they fit into a self-managed environment is they negotiate their roles and responsibilities. And if they want to organize themselves into little mini hierarchies inside a larger networked organization, that's perfectly okay. The key is that the association is voluntary and not imposed on them. So as long as they voluntarily and freely exercise free will and free choice to organize in a hierarchy within a larger organization, that's perfectly okay. Understanding that they're also free to disassociate at some point in the future. So that's good. Not everybody's good at organizing their own work. Yeah. So if somebody else can do it for me and it makes sense, then go for it by all means. So there's a place for everyone in a self-managed enterprise.
Yeah, and I guess that openness of them being able to say, you know what, I want you to help me with structure. I want you to line up the bowling pins, and I'm perfectly fine mowing them down.
Exactly.
But you got to create, I guess, that area of safety, that bubble that they can freely express that in. Now, the other side of it is the competency or skill deficiency. How do you manage that in a self-managed environment? Say somebody is in a role that they're really struggling with.
Well, every organization needs to perform, right? Or it's going to lose its customers and cease to exist. So what we do in a self-managed environment without command authority is we request change. Again, everything's accomplished through request and response. So we'll request that someone amp up their competency, and people have to respond in a professional manner to any and all requests. So the person's going to answer however they're going to answer, and they'll offer a plan to improve and get better, or they'll decline, or maybe the parties will negotiate something in between. And so we have a process, we call it gaining agreement, and it's all about direct communication, peer-to-peer. So if I request that you improve your skills, and you decline, and I still believe in my request, I can escalate to a mediation step and request a mediator to listen to both sides and hear my request and hear your response and offer some advice. And we still have the same outcomes possibilities at the end of that discussion. So person, you'll either agree or disagree, or we'll negotiate something in the middle. So if we go through that and you still disagree with my request, and I still believe in my request, I can escalate it to a third step, which is to bring in a panel of mediators, multiple mediators, whose job is to hear both sides and offer their best advice. And we still have the same possible outcomes at the end of that discussion. So if you agree with me, we're done. If we negotiate something, we're done. But if you still disagree with me and I still believe in my request, we have chosen by virtue of subscribing to this process that we'll document our difference in writing and submit it to binding arbitration. And we agree to follow whatever decision is made by the arbitrator, because it needs to end somewhere. So most of these kinds of requests are resolved between two individuals. Some escalate. Occasionally they go to arbitration, but it's a mechanism by which any conceivable difference or conflict can be resolved successfully.
Like a system of checks and balances, just like you said, like the reason why the legal system exists, or the reason why we have balance through the government. It's interesting. So you referenced in your Beyond Empowerment TED Talk, when I listened, the notion of working as a game. Daniel Mezek has often referenced treat the meeting as a game, the workplace. It's all a game, right? We have a goal, we have a desired outcome, and we got to play the game to get to the desired outcome. And Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL, also has a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He always, almost every time he talks about business, references playing the game, because sometimes you have to be in there and game the game, especially when this hierarchical situation unfolds. But you mentioned in self-management that there's a scorecard and a game at work, but I didn't hear the details of it. Could you explain that a little bit? I found that to be interesting.
Okay. Well, one of the reference books we used when we started Morningstar was a book called The Game of Work by a guy named Charles Coonrat. And essentially, the idea is figure out what the game is for each and every individual. And if there are no bosses walking around or managers to pat you on the back and tell you you're doing a good job or reprimand you for not doing a good job, you have to be able to tell yourself. And if you're going to be a self-manager in a highly engaging workforce, you'll want to make work as enjoyable as possible. And so we try to do that by gamifying work. And so we create a system that we call stepping stones, because our KPIs, measures, metrics, scorecards are called stepping stones, because considered stepping stones toward perfection, because we try to benchmark perfection. We know what other companies and industries are doing performance-wise, but we also want to know what perfection looks like for every given process. And we want to approach perfection and get as close as possible. We think that unlocks kind of blue sky innovation thinking. So perfection for a cost metric is 0. Perfection for an efficiency metric is 100%. Perfection for cycle time is 0. So we just try to figure out, well, what does perfection look like? And perfection in golf would be 18. We're pretty sure nobody's ever going to hit 18. But to the degree you strive for that, you're going to do better. You're going to get closer. So we try to express these stepping stones in time series line graphs showing trends, and then really look at the trends. Are the trends going up or down? And then we try to publish those transparently across the enterprise so that they trigger conversations among peers. So peers should be trying to add value to each other. And if they see a trend line bending in the wrong direction, then the conversation is about, what can I do to help you turn the trend around? How can I contribute to making your job easier or better or perform better? So self-management is really, it's about transparency, it's about clarity, and it's about accountability. And the accountability conversations take place between peers, by and between peers, every day, at all levels, at all business units, in all sectors. It's kind of a continuous process, continuous cycle of peer regulation, because that's what you have to have in the absence of traditional management.
Pretty good stuff. I like that, gamifying the workplace. So there's people listening right now, and they may not be signed up for this Open Leadership Symposium. And I know for myself, from watching that TED Talk, you're quite the speaker. For anyone that may be on the fence, why should they come see you at this Open Leadership Symposium speak?
Well, we're trying to plant seeds with leaders and thinkers and doers, and open up people's eyes to the possibilities for what is, I think, is the reason I chose my title for my new book, The No Limits Enterprise. There are ways to create enterprises that create great value for customers and society and the people who work within those enterprises without the burden of hierarchy and bureaucracy. And we've kind of fallen into the default mode of bureaucracy because it sort of works. It allows us in a way to grow and scale enterprises. But now we know there are better ways to do that in a way that avoids what Gary Hamel calls the management tax, which is the tremendous, expensive, and crushing burden of bureaucracy. He estimates that we could squeeze $3 trillion of value out of the current bureaucratic model and create more value that would be available for saving and investment and creating jobs and new products and services. So that's a tremendous cost that bureaucracy is imposing on us, and better ways to do things. We have many examples now beyond Morningstar. We look at companies like the Hire Group, the world's largest appliance maker that now has 4,000 self-managed teams creating new products and services all over the world. Lots of great examples. Jaipur Rugs in Jaipur, India, 40,000 weavers that are converting to a self-managed ecosystem. So we have lots of great examples, and we're just trying to open people's eyes.
Great way to work. I think somebody once told me, I think Patagonia was there. They operate in a very similar self-managed, very flat organization. Culture's a lot. Culture means a lot to an organization. I've heard over money, it's the reason why people would stay or leave a company. So this has been a really good podcast and a really good interview, and I'm glad you were able to do this. How can people connect with you, Doug?
So the most direct way, I suppose, is email d.kirkpatrick@newfocusgroup.com. That's NUFOCUS group.com. I'm also on Twitter. Handle is Redshifter3. And we have a website, which is newfocusgroupusa.com. Also on LinkedIn as well. So you can find me any of those places, and happy to talk to anyone that's interested in the subject matter.
And please let us know, what books do you have written on the market that people can buy? Where can they buy them? You've mentioned a boots on the ground consultancy service. Go ahead and plug away.
Plug away. Okay, so the first book I wrote is called Beyond Empowerment, The Age of the Self-Managed Organization. It's available on Amazon. not available yet in audio version, but it is available in German. So we have a German version that you can get, I believe, on Amazon and at expand.de. So we also have a book that I co-authored with several great co-authors through the Great Work Cultures group. It's called From Hierarchy to High Performance: Unleashing the Hidden Superpowers of Ordinary People to Realize Extraordinary Results. And I have 1 chapter out of 7 in that book about organizational self-management. And the new book that's going to be released soon with Forbes Books is called The No Limits Enterprise: Organizational Self-Management in the New World of Work. And that's more of a direct business book with an overview of cases and checklists and methods and other systems and approaches and frameworks and methodologies to implement self-management in the workplace. So that's what's going on there. And like I mentioned, we do consulting, we do organizational audits, we have a networked organizational software application available called Open Colleague. So that's what we do.
Great. Thanks for giving us your time. And one thing that we always do before we close out is provide our audience out there with a word of encouragement. A lot of them, are doing their best to try and gain efficiencies and make changes and do great things in their workplace. So is there any words of encouragement you could tell our people that they could apply?
So I'm always inspired by a friend, Stephanie Gladden from the University of Phoenix, and she was a business leader, and she just got a hold of my book, Beyond Empowerment, read it, shared it with her leadership team at the university where she ran a little IT customer service unit. They started a book club. So they just started a little book club, and they just started working through the book and theorizing how to apply the principles to their own workplace. And then they did it. I don't know how long the book club lasted, but once they were through working through the book, they figured out an implementation plan, and they implemented self-management in their business unit and did it very successfully. And the other thing she told me is that adopting the principles of self-management had a holistic benefit. So the principles are universal, and people found they were beneficial not only in the workplace, but also in every other aspect of their lives. Community lives, family lives, civic lives, every part of their lives got better as a result of embracing these kind of fundamental principles of organizational self-management.
Thank you again. Thanks for being here, Doug. And the word of advice I'd give to camp on to what Doug had said is you could start smaller grassroots movements of things, and it's about making the workplace fun. If it's not fun and you're dreading it and you don't want to go to work, then something's going on. Find like-minded people, start a book club, find some way that you could spark that flame and get things moving in the right direction. You could do it, and nothing's holding you back. Thanks for listening to this podcast. And once again, thanks, Doug, for being here. Thanks for joining us today. Next week, we bring in a guest who is brand new to the Agile space. And it's going to be a real treat because we're going to have him present questions and give him advice from our Coaching Agile Journeys leaders that can help him on his Agile journey. We're going to call it Agile Jumpstarter. This is the way to get into Agile and to immediately start producing results. We hope you'll join us next week. Have a great week and Agile on, my friends. To learn more or to contact us, visit www.coachingagilejourneys.com.